Hi and good evening. I'm Dr. Carmen McGuinness. Welcome to my channel. So I almost decided not to broadcast from here tonight, from this location on my back terrace, because I've had this crazy thing going on with these hawks that have been, there they are now. I think you could probably hear that. They've been just diving down into my back garden, and I've been a little stressed out about it because I have bunnies and things, just wild things, not my own harvested bunnies or anything, just wild bunnies that live in my garden. And I don't know, a hummingbird this morning, they darted at one of my little hummingbirds. So I like hawks, but I've been, I don't know, concerned that somebody might get hurt here in my garden. So I almost decided just to broadcast from inside so that I wouldn't be distracted by this, but then it's just such a beautiful evening, so here I am. So hopefully they won't sneak up on me while I'm talking at you. So as I said, I'm Dr. Carmen McGuinness, and this is my channel where I broadcast pretty much once a week on Sundays, sometimes midweek if something comes up that I just am dying to talk about. So today I'm going to discuss the connection between physical and emotional pain and how we might store or hide emotions in our body, resulting in physical symptoms. So in 1972, some research by a researcher named Candace Pert rocked the Western science world. It was actually published in 1973. I believe it was her dissertation paper when she was doing her PhD, her doctoral study. And then she later wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion. If you have not come across that book, I highly suggest you do. It's quite old now, but it was actually quite a spectacular book, and it's a wonderful read. So in her Molecules of Emotion book, Dr. Pert revealed to the average reader, because it was a popular academic book, how thoughts and emotions can and often do precede reality, physical reality. This single discovery that she made, which was to identify the opioid receptors in the brain, changed how we perceive the mind-body connection and launched the field of health psychology, which is actually my training in psychology before I did behavior analysis, was health psychology. So, and then decades of research followed into exactly how this all works. So today, in 2018, we understand that while a physical event such as fright or pain, and even happy events such as the birth of a grandchild, something I just went through, can cause thoughts and emotions, clearly. So too can a thought or emotion cause real physical outcomes such as symptoms. This is the part that's new. So, or in the case of happy thoughts, reduction in blood pressure, opening of constricted air passages, and a myriad of other positive physical outcomes can follow. So, in short, what I'm saying is that the pipeline goes both ways. So this isn't gearing up to be a lecture on thinking happy thoughts, although I will briefly mention that gratitude in particular, even when there's little to be grateful for, has been correlated with physical and mental well-being. We all have something we can feel gratitude for. So if you can do it, do it. No lecture will follow, just a suggestion. But truly, I'm not going to give that particular talk today. And I'm sure that you can hear that same presentation on YouTube if you look. So what I am going to talk about is how we sometimes store or hide emotion in our bodies, storing them rather than facing and releasing them. I'm also going to touch on the various functions of pain, or a couple of them. So I'm going to share 3 examples today, one from a client, one from myself, and one that I've invented completely. though it's exactly the sort of thing that happens. And no, I'm not going to tell you which of the three is which. Just going to throw them out there. So here we go. So the first one. Victor is a 47-year-old man who's going through a rather rough divorce. You see, Victor's wife runs his very successful construction business. And while Victor is the man on the scene, his wife, Denise, is the one who actually schedules the scene, creates it. Subcontractors, building inspectors, potential homeowners, payroll, little things like that are all taken care of by Denise, or I should say, were. At 49, Victor's wife decided she was done with marriage and her job, working for Victor, and she wanted to try life on her own. Although she hadn't actually filed for divorce, she had gone ahead and bought a new home in rural Atlanta, probably 1,000 miles away from Central Florida, where their daughter lives. And she had given Victor 6 weeks' notice for her job. It was 2 weeks into that notice when Victor came to me via referral from his chiropractor, someone I work closely with. You see, Victor was unable to work at that time due to a back injury. The problem was there was no organic cause for the pain and inflammation. Sure, Victor, as a contractor, could identify lots of potential injuries that had occurred, carrying things, stuff like that. But there was no identifiable single incident that could explain the pain he was experiencing. And although his chiropractor had repaired a minor subluxation, dislocation, 3 times, it kept recurring. As you can well imagine, Victor's wife agreed to remain in Central Florida and stay on at the company until his injury was repaired and he could return to work. So after 6 sessions with me and continued care from his chiropractor, Victor's pain and inflammation slowly began to subside and the subluxations ceased. Was Victor using pain to create a need for his wife to stay? Did his thoughts and fears, emotions, create that pain? We may never know the answer to that. But after 6 sessions, he had found a job superintendent to replace her at work and was ready to say goodbye. And he was pain-free. Or as Victor put it, the physical pain is past and now comes the emotional pain. So I guess a very real and fair question is, did that physical pain did it act as a storage place for the emotional pain that he really wasn't ready at that point to face? And as his words, his very words, physical pain is past, now comes the emotional pain, take us to my second example, one in which the only function of the client's physical pain was to store in her sacred body her deep emotional pain. So on to Jessica. Jessica, a client, is a middle-aged attorney. She had a very long history when she came to me of neck and lower back pain. The first incident occurred that she could remember when she was in her late 20s. And it was related to an early case she had as an attorney, or so she said. So severe was the pain that Jessica became unable to work and became fearful of any physical activity of any sort, and in fact remained at home for most of 6 months. It wasn't until she saw a psychologist to deal with the anxiety caused by the pain, now this is before me, this is years ago, and was prescribed a Xanax, something that I never do. I don't prescribe anything, that she slowly began to improve. 2 years later, when she weaned herself off of the Xanax, Jessica suffered a very bad panic incident and some recurring panic for a couple of weeks, and her back pain returned. So fast forward a couple of decades and a much improved relationship with stress and anxiety. Maturity helps. Jessica was still battling regular back and neck aches and pains and was frequently laid up for a few days to a week or even 2 weeks. Jessica came to me decades into this whole history for relationship difficulties. She wasn't currently in a relationship, but she'd had about a 10-year cycle since a divorce of seeing emotionally unavailable men. And she came to me kind of knowing this and saying, so what do I do about it? And digging back in, we agreed that her 2 husbands were not exactly emotional heroes either. So this was probably an adult lifelong history of problems finding people that are emotionally available. So during one of our talks, we hit on something, and it was the very tip of a memory. And as we dug a little deeper, it turns out that Jessica's very first physical injury to her back occurred when she was about 5 years old, and her sister and brother, who were, from my understanding of it, probably about 12 and 14 at that point, swang her from her arms and legs, pitching her into the family swimming pool. What Jessica confided next still haunts me, and that is that they did this without her permission. If, in fact, she was fighting it. She had run away from them. They had grabbed her, got her by the arms and legs, and during what can only be called an attack, both of her arms and one of her legs was dislocated. So the siblings assumed she was joking when Jessica called for help from the deep end of the pool, unable to swim with 3 limbs dislocated. So she did survive, obviously, and the most concerning thing about this now ancient story was the blasé with which she told it to me. Even as she remembered it, there was no visible trauma involved. It was just sort of, oh yeah, and then this happened, and then, oh, and then this happened. I hadn't thought about that for years, kind of thing. So that was very concerning. The next 4 sessions were spent helping Jessica realize that the incident was really not okay, and how it was only by making very little of it that she was able to process it at all, the trauma associated with it. In other words, she had dissociated during and just after the incident. So Jessica has forgiven her sister and brother and wrote them both letters to tell them that she'd forgiven them. Her brother has been dead for several years, so the letter was delivered to his gravesite. She read it aloud there and left it at the gravesite. And her sister, when she gave her the letter, simply joked about it, saying that Jessica was being silly. And, of course, Jessica forgave her for that, too. So the third and final example, Tara. Tara is a 26-year-old girl with intellectual, or I should say woman, with intellectual disabilities. She's lived at home with her mother and father her entire life, previously an older brother and sister as well. Her parents had told her from the time that Tara was in her late teens that when she turned 25, she would be moving out on her own. And they'd spent several years locating a very good group home where adults with disabilities enjoy supported living. At 20, Tara began to develop breathing difficulties and was eventually diagnosed with quite chronic severe asthma. Every time Tara began to improve in her symptoms, her parents would once again start discussing the group home because she was now 20, early 20s. And as you can imagine, she would once again decline physically with quite severe chest pain associated to the asthmatic symptoms and quite severe breathing issues. several hospital visits, etc. So I saw Tara and her parents for about 4 months just to get that far, just to get far enough along for them to consider a few connections here between their plan and her physical symptoms and the timing. Fortunately, Tara's parents completely understand and understood then the connection between their plans for her and her physical symptoms, as did Tara when I talked to her about what my theory was. So when all parties agreed to put the plan on hold for a couple of years, when Tara was now 25, or 26 actually, Tara's symptoms completely vanished. It's now been over a year. Eventually, Tara will need to be moved to a group home. Her parents are not going to live forever. But for now, the family is together. Tara is healthy, no symptoms of asthma, and together, she and her parents and I are working on confidence and independence to prepare Tara for an inevitable move. So there you go. There's 3 examples of how pain and other physical symptoms can manifest as a result of trauma or emotional need. So in parting, I invite my viewers to do 2 things. One from each direction, because remember this pipeline goes both ways. One is to ask yourself what that pain or other symptom might be related to, if you have any bodily pains, even minor ones. Does it have a color, a temperature, a shape? When you start to give aches and pains form, they often begin to reveal themselves for what they really are. And number 2, when you experience strong emotions, ask yourself where you feel them in your body. Now, often people have trouble connecting with that. They don't even understand what I mean. And those are the people that I think are at the highest risk. So think about where you feel that in your body. And then take a deep breath and release the emotions. So that's it. That's all I have to ask of you today. That, and remember to experience gratitude. Remember to notice what you're thankful for and express it out loud to nobody, just to yourself, to the universe. So I hope this has been helpful either to you or to you personally, or for someone that you care about that comes to mind as we went over these things. And I hope you have a blessed day and week, and I shall see you next time. And very glad the hawks didn't interrupt. Have a good week. I wonder how I look to him. Hopefully not tasty. Earlier, he and his partner were lighting various places in my garden and chattering away to one another, and I don't know, it started to sound like a story, and it started to sound like something they were trying to tell me. It was quite a magical little moment. I was very happy listening to them. Oh, and there's a hummingbird, look. Oh, see the hummingbird? Oh, look at that. Welcome to my fairy garden. And that is precisely why I don't nip the buds off of things when they go to seed, because the butterflies and the hummingbirds